Noticed a rise in this sort of remote work across tech over a number of years now. I know some companies out of Silicon Valley, including Zapier and a few others, have gone fully remote. Envision is fully remote. And while the idea of working fully from home has its appeal, I was never particularly drawn to it. So now I'm finding myself forced in this situation. And I think that there are some practical changes, right? I'm in my guest room / home office. My users are no longer down the hall. They are a virtual space away. And I have to be a lot more mindful around everyone's state of mind and my own impact, right? I can't be fully productive. So that's a practical impact on what I work. The flip side of that is the technology has made it so that the realities of what I do, doing my wireframes, conducting my user research, syncing up with my team, working with my engineers, none of that has really changed in a meaningful way. I'm interfacing with a screen instead of a human being, but practically speaking, there hasn't been a radical impact. And I think that that's remarkable. We're so fortunate. If you look back, even as far as 40, 50 years ago, there have been other pandemics of a similar nature. The impact that it had on society was very different than what we're experiencing today. And I think we're experiencing emotional and financial repercussions that are unavoidable, but it could have been so much worse. And so, again, like for me, it's not really changing all that much, which is crazy. You'd think it would. It's just not. As a designer, my response is, of course, going to be, yeah, UX will solve all the problems in the world, right? And while I believe that to a certain extent, I think that there are systemic issues that design can help but can't inherently solve. I think the specific areas that UX might be able to help in the future is to, again, focus on knowing there are systemic issues in how our societies operate. How can we help businesses structure themselves, structure their processes, build tools to help them adapt to unpredictable situations? I'm thinking, just shooting from the hip here, but thinking about businesses like OpenTable and Grubhub, all these things that are helping these businesses adapt. Once things reopen, what does it look like when a business reopens? And are there other services and opportunities that design can help identify and explore to, again, like, does it look like a gradual rollout, a gradual reopening? Are there opportunities there? And this is where the design is going to come in. You can come up with some idea and try it, but doing the research, thinking things through, getting to the core of what people actually need, as opposed to what's a good business opportunity or what's a clever idea. Those are the tools that are going to help us tease out a more successful business model, which is ultimately one of the main value points of design, right? Is coming at it from a evidence-based and problem-based approach as opposed to just a good idea. So yeah, off the top of my head, that's going to be the main area that I think UX is going to help, is just looking at what are the opportunities and the problems that the businesses have faced, and how can we adapt in small and big ways to that. Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at. I think we're going to see a lot of businesses that have the benefit of office work reevaluating the need for offices themselves. But that in and of itself is a luxury and a privilege, and many businesses won't have that. And I think those are the areas that they're going to have some very rich opportunity, right? Like restaurants, concert venues, even small practical shops like a tire repair shop. How are these businesses going to adapt to a world that's semi-open for an extended period? And what about the next time this happens? Because this is not an isolated incident. You look at the course of human history, this happens pretty often, right? It's going to happen again, probably in our lifetimes. What are we going to do now? And what are some tools that we can get in place before this happens again? As to what it looks like, I don't know. I'm not going to predict like what things look like 3 months or 6 months or 3 years from now, because I have no idea. But I know that there are going to be people looking at these problems thinking, like Irene was mentioning, senior people are being underserved. Likewise, small business owners have been radically underserved. A couple smart startups have come in and presented solutions to help them, at least get by, if not thrive. What are some richer solutions that are out there that some clever designer out there is thinking like, gosh, these businesses just need to do this thing. We're going to see it. And it's going to be a combination of the entrepreneurial types who see business opportunities and the more sensitive people like us who are thinking about the human impact. I have strong opinions about the pandemic, and I feel confident that we will not see any long-standing changes that weren't already starting to manifest. And the reason I feel so strongly about it is, like I mentioned earlier, this is not a new or isolated incident. There have been things even in our parents' lifetimes, or actually some of our own lifetimes as well. I think as recently as the mid 1960s, there have been global pandemics. And you look back to the pandemic of 1918 that killed 20 to 50 million people. That's a big deal. By 1920, life was pretty much back to normal. And right after that was the Roaring Twenties. So the 1918 influenza was basically kind of a memory at that point. So I think some of us that are most heavily impacted by this will have a long-standing repercussion in our life, but I think society as a whole is not radically going to change. I think businesses that are starting to consider going remote will do so more heavily, and I think more businesses that weren't thinking about remote will start to explore it because it is not a bad business decision. You're not paying as much overhead, and you can pay people a lower cost of living because they can work from less expensive areas. But there was already a trend towards that, and I feel confident that while the pain of it is very fresh, most of us, once this is done, a couple of years down the line, are going to remember it simply as that bad period that was, uncomfortable and to certain people tragic, certainly. But I don't think it's going to stay anything more than that. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball. I could be wrong, but I don't see it really changing much. And again, I speak from a place of tremendous privilege, working for a company that can allow me to work remotely. It's even an option, right? Like I'm so lucky to have that. Millions of people just in my city don't have that luxury. And I think that once this is all done, some new startup might be offering them some service to better help them do their job or whatever, but the meat and potatoes of what they do, working in construction, working in film production, working in the food industry, working in events, working in entertainment, those things I don't think are going to radically change, at least not in novel ways. And certainly happy to be wrong on that and curious to see how it shakes out. But I'm not anticipating anything radically different 5 years from now. So. Selfishly, it's very relevant. I have a 9-year-old who's downstairs right now, right in your target age range. And I've been thinking about what would it mean for him to learn the basic fundamentals of like design thinking. As much as I hate that term, it's a good shorthand, right? So like taking a user-centered approach, thinking about what are the people using the tool or product, what are the problems they're facing. Let's start with that as an initial hypothesis and build around that. And I think that there are two different specific benefits to teaching people of that age range those sort of mindsets. The first is a more practical and obvious answer, right? So kids think they have all the right answers and they know everything. And so teaching them this approach of, hey, think about what the problem is and then start solving from there will help get them thinking at an earlier age to not rely on their own sort of like ideas, but rather to focus on the problem when they start to build products. And I think that there will always need to be a healthy tension between people who are strong personalities coming up with ideas to push the envelope forward and not trying to solve problems, right? The Steve Jobs of the world who are so opinionated and stubborn that they just force people to adopt certain things that it turns out are actually pretty awesome, right? We don't necessarily get that from taking a user-centered approach. So I think we need that healthy balance. And I think teaching kids at an early age will get those who aren't super stubborn narcissists to think about people and the impact they're having. And you'll get maybe a more balanced product development process and more interesting products. So that's the easy answer, right? The more interesting thing is getting kids to start thinking about what is it like to be someone who isn't you, right? Getting them to develop empathy sooner, getting them to consider, hey, what does it mean to be wrong? How can you fail more quickly? Those are things that don't come quickly to kids. They don't come easily. They're hard learned lessons. And I think that the design process itself really fosters those sort of lessons, right? Like, hey, let's start with a hypothesis and figure out where it's wrong, not if, but where. And I think for emotional development and personality development, that would be a wonderful lesson, right? Like, don't get too attached and too precious to your ideas. Just start with something and figure out where you're wrong and learn from it. I think that'll really help them become more resilient people. And I hadn't even considered that until you put the question to me, like, what are the benefits of teaching design thinking to kids? So, my son personally, he gets very upset when he, doesn't get good grades or when he fails a question. If he had been taught in class, hey, just start with a hypothesis and figure out where you're wrong and learn from that. Imagine that different experience of not doing well on a math test and being, oh, I need to work on this, as opposed to, oh, I suck at math. I think that would make for a really, truly different emotional development. And I think it would actually make the world a better place. So yeah, I love this question. And I think that this is a really meaningful thing. And I hope that you all are successful in your endeavor to get this into schools, even in a small way. I think this could have a huge impact. So crossing my fingers, and I will watch with bated breath as you navigate this.